Hey everybody, welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How are ya? I hope you're having a great spring. I hope everybody's doing well. You know, these are such pivotal times. We've got COVID flaring up all over the world. People are trying to redirect themselves. We've got all this crazy astrology, right? All these planets in Taurus, which Venus is the ruler of Taurus, and that's all about opulent yummy food and big expensive clothes, but it's also about the earth and stewardship and not getting places too quickly. And all of this big Taurus aspect, I was being told by a friend in the know astrologically, that's also sitting in the Uranus area. And Uranus, of course, is the planet of revolution, and Taurus is the bull. So you can imagine having that bull energy, the bull in the china closet energy, coming right straight at us. We've got a lot going on right now. Revolution through an unstoppable force that gets there one step at a time, but also brings with it a major attention to detail for opulence and for beautiful things. So this is what we're looking at with all of these aspects right now. And it's really interesting because I have been really involved in the production for Road Angel lately. There's a lot that's changing in my life on my end of things. And so everybody I know is going through massive changes right now, big changes, great big changes. And one of the things that I want to bring forward in today's podcast is how to maximize these big changes that are coming up, because we're all feeling this change modality. And I would encourage everybody to maximize this change in a really positive way rather than a negative way. You know, we can maximize things many ways. We can decide that we're going to redo a big life goal that we had and allow it to fit in with our more modern, I guess, ways of doing things. Or we could decide that instead we're going to take up arms and storm a capital. I mean, that's also revolution, right? So, you know, when I look out over the ethers, and I've thought long and hard about putting this podcast out and I've talked to the universe about it and did all the things, because I find that as I've gone along in my career, if you want to call it that, whatever, in my duty or my choice to bring messages through or my work or my career as a person who works in the psychic realm, one of the things that I've seen is that there is a real mishandling of information out there. And a lot of psychics will come forward and they'll get a vision and they'll throw it up on Facebook or they'll put a video out about it. And you know, I used to do a lot more videos really about this time frame and what we could expect. And then after a while, as I was looking ahead, the future's looking a little Old West, right? And so I'm thinking, oh my God, do we really want to talk about this? Or should we be focusing on consciousness or whatever? And so after a long chat with the universe, I've kind of come out the other end of that big long chat that's been months and months and months of a chat, recognizing that if we don't talk about certain things, then we can't really decide how those certain things are going to impact us when the timeline hits us. And it's been a rough conversation with the universe because some of the things I'm seeing as I look forward are not super happy. They're not timelines we can necessarily ditch or avoid. We just have to figure out how to work with them. And so one of the things that I wanted to bring up in one of these timelines today is this weird sense of uprising. You know, I don't know if many of you have been following the fact that, thank God, social media is really quiet surrounding the idea of, let's storm the Capitol, let's get our guns and get out there and just really blow things apart. And in part, social media is very quiet about this because, in my opinion, there's a lot of social media providers that got caught in the gotcha trap of freedom of speech. And I call it a gotcha trap because we do need to have freedom of speech in the United States. Yet at what point do you cut off the communication on social media because it's now a terrorist group that's trying to organize everybody? You know, at what point does one weigh in to say, okay, I think we probably need to not provide the platform for the terrorist organization. You guys are going to have to make up your own dark web weird thing for that. And it's a gotcha trap because, you know, our Constitution is pretty straightforward about allowing freedom of speech. However, that is in terms of the government. The government is not supposed to suppress people's ideologies. It doesn't say anything about, well, someday, because you have to remember, right, our founding fathers, everybody was coming over from England. So you have to suspect that there was still somewhat of an English accent, which actually, by the way, did you know the aristocratic English accent that we've all come to know and love? Really, in England, this wasn't as much an accent as we think of now. It was an affectation taught to those of a certain social strata to separate oneself from the common people. Just so you know that. But I can just picture, our founding fathers and whatever accent they had back in the day, fighting about freedom of speech. Now, I'm sure that nobody was talking about Facebook because, again, they're publicly held corporations, yet they're not run by the government, right? So Facebook technically is not actually subject to the, quote, freedom of speech constitutional blah blahs that the federal government is underneath, and neither is Twitter, or neither is any publicly or privately held business. They're not part of the government, not until the government buys Facebook, and then, boy, howdy, they're going to be up on top of it. And also, Facebook is not the Washington Post or, the New York Times or a newspaper editing a comments section. So it always cracked me up when people talked about, my freedom of speech is being limited. It's like, dude, I own Facebook, and I don't have to let your garbage up here if I don't feel like it. I'm not the government. So ironically, there's a lot of people who have this ideology of hate speech being out there as being freedom of speech. Well, you can talk about whatever you want in the United States. I mean, if you want to look like a giant asshat on social media, you go for it. Yet there's a certain level of hatred that's not really palatable in the 21st century, especially post George Floyd, especially post Breonna Taylor. There's just a level of hate that we're kind of over at this point in America, unless you are someone who's part of that culture of hatred, in which case you're just going to keep being a hater. Haters always hate. So anyway, back to my overarching point of this podcast. I've been looking ahead, and I've been seeing this major uprising, like big time uprising. Remember when I was telling y'all a while back about watch for state capitals and militias coming up and people storming state capitals? And we saw a little of that after the Capitol insurrection. Well, I keep seeing in the ethers out there, and I'm sure the FBI's got to know about this, and I'm sure the CIA probably knows about this to see if it's being coordinated with any foreign countries. Misanthropic, weird lob of future information. However, it's what I've been seeing for quite a while now. And we saw the Capitol insurgency, and so I'm waiting to see whenever this coordinated, day of reckoning, or I can see some really, quite honestly, overly dramatic and kind of sad name that the Operation Recovered Constitution or something. I don't know. Like a bad 80s movie with Sylvester Stallone in it. However, when I look at all this, we could talk about, okay, so there's a potential giant coordinated attack with mobs rising up and trying to take over different capitals. And, then I see law enforcement dispatched, a lot of National Guard, things like that. But then all that's happening is the folks that are claiming that the government is going to try to oppress them are creating a scenario where the government oppresses them. Why would we do that? Why do we do this as human beings? Why do we think it's important to create our own worst nightmare? We do this because we feel like we have no purpose without whatever the weird thing is that we need to enact being enacted. In other words, if I really believe that all guns and ammo are going to be confiscated, then I go out every day and I buy boxes of ammo. Well, what happens there when I do that? Well, that creates an ammo shortage. Okay. Now, if my narrative is that, that Joe Biden and his Democrats are taking my bullets. Well, okay, then that's my narrative. But the fact is, it's I shouldn't say it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious. There's a lot of people who don't. So I hope this isn't too off color. I live in a gun state, okay? I live in Montana, and a lot of people here have guns. They hunt for their winter food. People eat the elk that they shoot here in Montana. It's not just people like our kind of weird governor who shot a trapped Yellowstone wolf on a Sinclair Broadcasting representative's mega ranch. And apparently the wolf had been trapped there for a few days, and there's rumors that they gave it water just to keep it alive long enough so that the governor of Montana, Greg Gianforte, could come and shoot it. Yeah, that's our governor. So that is not the kind of hunter person that most Montanans are. Most Montanans they're bow hunting, they are rifle hunting, they are out to get meat in their freezer. They're not just popping a wolf because they are going to get a written warning from the state of Montana, like the governor did. And then the state of Montana, of course, allowed him to keep the skull and the hide because that's what he was after. He's a trophy hunter. And maybe he, hunts for his meat, but our governor is a little odd in Montana. So when we're talking about a gun state, when we're talking about guns, every time we get a Democratic president, there's this big battle cry, and it generally comes through the National Rifle Association, that the Democrats, the evil Democrats, are going to take all your bullets away and your guns. Now, this has been happening. It started with Clinton, but it was really bad through Obama. And now, of course, Joe Biden is in the White House. And so now, of course, there is a female African-American and Indian-American vice president. So by God, they're going to take your guns and your bullets extra now because of that. And so this is what I think is hilarious. You will see lines in Walmart and at gun stores here in Montana, and they're out the door with people buying bullets, okay? Because there's a, quote, bullet shortage. Well, there's been a bullet shortage since the pandemic, because all of the prepper people, all of the people who believe that they need to stack up cases and cases of bullets and beans and, oxygen and 6 tomato seeds and who even knows, cow semen for later to grow cows, who even knows, in their basements, they go and they show up and they freak out and they buy ammo, right? Now, what happens, gang, when we all show up to the grocery store and we all buy toilet paper in fear of a dirty poopy butt during a pandemic? What happens? We have a toilet paper shortage. Is that the government's fault? Not really. It's our fault. We had a run on toilet paper in the same way that we have a run on bullets. Bullets, you see. So these folks who fear that the evil Democrats are taking their bullets are literally creating their own shortages by hoarding bullets. So, and it cracks me up every time. I remember I had to be out at the Lowe's, and that's on the west end of my hometown of Billings, where my wife and my daughter and I live. And next to the Lowe's is the Walmart, because, that's just how it rolls in those suburban areas. And there was this huge line. And so I slowed my Jeep down and rolled down my window and asked this guy, because, clearly it's some kind of hunting thing. The line are these scruffy guys. They're all wearing camo. Some of them had rifles slung over the back of their shoulder. At first, I thought it was some kind of heavy-duty pro semi-automatic, like a protest or something, because, we have those in Montana periodically. So I'm standing here and I'm in my Jeep, I'm sitting, and I say to the guy, I said, "Hey, what's going on, you guys?" And he said, "Oh, bullets are going to go on sale. They come on every other Friday or whatever." And he goes, "You got to get them before they sell out because the government's keeping them." And I didn't say anything because this dude, I'm not kidding. He looked like a character out of a Western, except for he was wearing Duck Dynasty camo. But he had 2 6-shooter type gun. I'm not a gun person, so I couldn't tell you what they were, but they had a barrel and 6 bullets. They weren't quite as big as a Dirty Harry gun, but they were 2 on his thighs. He had some kind of semi-automatic looking thing that was camo strapped over his back. And across the front of him, he had what looked like a pump action shotgun. And he's just standing there in all of his guns. And I kind of wanted to say, are you bringing those for a fitting? Are you having a bullet fitting today? Is that like a wedding fitting where you bring your best men in and they all get their tuxes fitted, only this is for your guns? I didn't say that because the guy looked like he was one chromosome short of blowing my brain pan out. But I mean, I was fascinated. And this line, you guys, it was like 4 people wide and it went all the way down the block. It was fascinating. So when we're talking about the idea of, a militia that's going to simultaneously storm all of these different state capitals, I am positive that the FBI has got to know about this. So I'm sure they will have that under control. Yet at the same time, why do we create our worst fear? Why do we do it? Well, I started to talk about the fact that we do it because we're trying to create purpose in our life. And for so many people in the United States, opposition has been purpose. I mean, if you look at our films, if you look at our movies, look at our 1980s movies, they are weird. There's a lot of violence in those 80s movies, and women are being treated terribly, and they're barely wearing any clothes, and the guys are shooting everybody up. It's bizarre. And that was only, 30 years ago? And you go back even 10 years, there's so much violence on our television screen that the violence is always in Congress with purpose. Like, you don't just see a hero on some crazy sci-fi movie blowing aliens away who's not doing it. There's a reason. So in the United States, we've trained people that violence equals purpose. Violence equals heroism. And so many people at this point in time honestly feel like they really don't have much to live for. You don't just storm the Capitol of the United States if you're really looking forward to going home to your life. And there were some of those folks, we have a lot of them in Montana that have been getting picked up and drug off to prison by the FBI. However, a lot of those folks were just dead shocked that they got arrested, because we can no longer tell in the United States the difference between violent uprising and being a hero. We are so indoctrinated with violence. It's nuts. It's crazy. And the alpha and the alpha male, and you have to knock the alpha male down, and oh my God. So what can we do to help our fellow citizens who feel that the only way that they can achieve purpose is through violence? There's not a whole heck of a lot we can do except to make more discussions happen and draw parallels to other cultures in the world that we criticize, who also reward violence with 100 virgins and a trip to Allah's all paid for expense trip to heaven. Honestly, what's the difference between somebody storming the Capitol and crushing a police officer and killing people in the name of American freedom, and somebody who is on a far fringe Muslim terrorist edge who's blowing up a town square in the name of freedom? Really, you have Agenda 1 and Agenda 2, but it's all violence. And it's all holy, and it's all in the name of God. When I was watching those Capitol insurrectionists, so many of them were waving giant flags with crosses on them. And that was kind of a weird deal. I'm sitting there thinking, how in your mind are you justifying this? Jesus is with me as I crush this evil police officer. God is with me. That's an illness of spirit when you are believing that the death of somebody is holy. That's just, wow, America. So when we look at the uprisings and we look at what's created this violence culture and purpose through violence, we really do need to give people some sort of purpose that is not violence related. And that is really hard to find in America. Now listen, we've got our armed forces. And I have a ton of respect for our military. I have a ton of respect for our men and women in the military. My family has been people in the military. My dad was in the Army. He was a captain. I know beautiful people serving. I have cousins in the military. And their hearts are absolutely in the right place. They are not going into the military saying, yay, let's go suppress people all over the globe and kill people. They're there hoping to keep the peace. And of course, as bureaucracies go, generally it's more about the war than the peace. However, when we look at even the military service and our recruitment for the military service, we show great honor in standing up and defending your country. And there is a lot of honor in that. Yet, how about all the folks who are frontline workers who are also fighting all kinds of other fronts here in America? And not taking away from our military. I love our men and women of the military. I'm simply saying there are many, many types of wars to fight, and some of them do not involve guns. Some of them involve viruses. In part, we've been going through this COVID transition, and as part of the podcast, looking ahead, not only am I seeing these militia uprisings that look like they're kind of letting things chill out for right now, and it looks like this would be something more at an awkward time, like at the end of summer or the beginning of fall, just right before big other things are happening or the turn of the next new year. These are in what in TV we call shoulder seasons. They're in between seasons that I see that this would take place if the FBI doesn't bust it all up. And when I look at all of this and I look ahead and I look at our COVID numbers, COVID, there are men and women who are fighting the front of COVID, our doctors, our nurses, our first responders, who are still being overwhelmed with COVID variants and all kinds of COVID strains that are blowing up and hitting the forefront. And we still have people who believe that, we don't need masks and they don't do anything and whatever. And at this point, gang, we really aren't going to be able to convince people that they need to put a mask on. If they haven't been having a mask on this whole time, they probably aren't going to have it on at this point. Yet what we see are the people fighting the war of ignorance. And that's kind of a hardcore word, and that may offend some folks out there. And what I mean by that is I'm not calling anybody stupid, but to be ignorant of a fact means that you don't know the fact or you will not receive the fact. So that's not calling one quote stupid. There is an uninformed aspect to the word ignorance, okay? And I've found that there is a great deal of happiness in remaining ignorant in the United States, because remaining ignorant means that you don't need to change your routine. You don't need to change your belief systems. You get to go on autopilot and just cook along business as usual. And it's not a big deal. Well, where this gets sticky is when we do have a culture of violence, and we do have half of the country, quite honestly, and probably 1/4 of that half that deeply believes in overthrowing our country because they don't have any money in savings. They are tired. They have worked their whole lives. They feel like the government has disregarded them. They blame people of color for everything, for taking our jobs and all these other crazy, crazy things just because they have had financial troubles. It's much easier to demonize a group of people than look at our own life and, maybe we could have made better choices in our work. Or maybe we live in a town and our work choices are limited and we don't have the money to move. So maybe we feel very frustrated by that. Maybe we feel depressed by that. We're watching people in America like Elon Musk and, these other entrepreneurs who have built huge companies and they go on to make gamillion dollars. And there are folks in this country that are literally stretching out $15,000 for the whole year, $25,000 for the whole year. So we end up with what I like to call the French Revolution syndrome, where we've got folks in this nation who have done very well for themselves. And you're never going to hear me demonize money. I think that's ridiculous. I know lots of people with lots of money, and they're amazing, and they help a lot of people with that money. And I know a lot of people who are really struggling. And, my wife and I, we are lucky to be just in that solid middle class and not the upper middle class, because I'm learning now that middle class goes all the way up to $200,000 a year. And I'm like, whoa, we're certainly not quite there. However, when I was a kid, $200,000 a year was a rich person. And now that's considered middle class when we look at all of the things that create inflation and the rise of goods and services and the cost of those rises of goods and services. So when we look at what would cause an uprising of people to stand off at capitals, and again, regrettably, I'm still seeing that this is a pretty predominant timeline here, helping the FBI has a lid on this, and I'm sure they must at this point. And maybe they can break all this up before it gets to that crazy level. Yet, when we're looking at what drives people's desperation, we've lost our magnetic north for the most part in the United States. And what do I mean by that? Well, what these angels show me is that as a culture, we, obviously been very blessed, especially if you're white, especially if you're male in the United States, you've been really blessed. And you shouldn't feel guilty about being blessed, but just admit it. I'm blessed. Rock on. I should do something with my blessings. If you're a white woman, you've been more blessed than a woman of color by the United States way of casting money and casting, I guess, social opportunities, right? And I'm not saying people of color aren't blessed. I'm making fun of systematic racism that's embedded in our country. So when we look at this that goes back so far, there's such a fear in just facing what we are, meaning, let me back it up. I've got this wonderful friend, Sherry. She is a freaking hoot. And Sherry is in her early 70s, and she marched in the 60s with her white lipstick and her hippie signs and, make love, not war. And she's still very active as a voice of love out there in the world. I also play music with her. It's fun. And Sherry put up a meme that was just hilarious and sad at the same time. And it said something along the line, you've probably seen this meme on Facebook. It was something along the lines of, yeah, I hear the United States is having a lot of bad luck, considering it was built across all these Native American burial grounds on the backs of imprisoned slaves, And that's really the basis of every horror movie. Oh, I'm having bad luck. I'm on an Indian burial ground, or, deceased slave bones are in the house. But if you think about it, that's kind of how our country was founded, right? So we've got all this energy that we're trying to make right. And for so many people, they cannot separate making this energy right, meaning just acknowledging that we can do things better in the United States. They can't separate that from them being guilty of blah, blah, blah. And maybe some of us are guilty of blah, blah, blah. And instead of saying, wow, I didn't even realize I was guilty of blah, 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 we just get really insecure and, get our Militia cosplay outfit on and stick our extra Walmart bullets in our butt pack and head to the state capitol and wave our guns because that makes us feel in control. But the interesting thing about this time frame, gang, is, I can talk all day about this weird coordinated state capitol militia thing, but that's not really the point of the podcast, even though that is a representation of the point of the podcast. The point of the podcast is that how the hell did we get here? And what can we do about it? And again, one of the things that we can do about it is if the safe opportunity arises, and I do say safe because we are going to see people losing their crap here, gang. We've been seeing it as soon as the pandemic gave way to restaurants being back open and whatnot. The shootings started again because people have been locked up and mental health issues have been inflamed. So if a safe opportunity arises, and do use your common sense in this era, there are people who are looking for a fight. I will tell you that straight on out, gang. This is unlike any other time in the United States that we've ever lived. There are more people with access to firearms. There are more people who have been inundated by just false messages and truly believe they're in a holy war for the soul of America. I mean, folks who actually go and storm a Capitol, gang, think about what that would take for you to do that. What would it take for you to strap on a gun and storm a capital of your state? Literally. So if we can at least attempt to try to put ourselves in the mindset of someone else who might be a little more extreme than you and I, okay? And I'm not trying to make you paranoid, gang. I would be doing everybody a disservice if I put up this podcast and was just like, hey, everything's great. Things will be great. We have a few hurdles to get through. And while we're getting over those hurdles, having some discernment is a good idea. I'm not saying be paranoid of all your neighbors, just be discerning, okay? And if it comes to pass that you have an opportunity to speak to someone who you happen to know is full of a lot of paranoia and upset feelings, talk to them about why they think things have really gone south. And what you're going to come up with is that it's very important for at least half of this country to pass around a doctrine of oppression where the oppression breeds heroes, because that's the only purpose that a lot of people feel like they have in this day and age. And that's really sad. And then we're gonna hop down to our Gen Zs, okay? Our teenagers, our late teens, our early 20-somethings, up to our youngest swath of, Gen Ys, millennials, whatnot, but especially our Gen Zs. They aren't interested in all this infighting. A lot of these younger people, much younger people, they want to get the heck out of the United States. People my daughter's age, they want to move somewhere else. They don't want this weird, purposeless, angry fight that they've inherited because they feel like they have a whole different purpose. And I'm being general here, gang. But a lot of the Gen Zs, their purpose is the climate. They're fighting to stay alive in 10 years and not have these ocean levels rise, which, by the way, since we're doing a little predictive podcast, watch the next 2 years, 2022 and 23 up to 2025. We're going to have all kinds of weird ocean stuff, ocean levels rising, all kinds of things. So Gen Z, their fight is for kindness in the world and to save the planet. So I want you to think about these two consciousness clashing in the United States. You've got basically there are some indoctrinated millennials and some Gen Zs that want to fight and storm the Capitol, but most of that's the older edge of the millennials and the older edge of Gen Y, and also a lot of baby boomers and Gen X, my generation, who are disenfranchised. And that makes me cringe, man. When I see my fellow Gen Xers storming the Capitol, I just want to go Molly Ringwald bitch slap them and say, what in the hell is wrong with you? We were the generation that was marching to choose love, to save people from AIDS, wrap it up. We were the generation that were getting out there to fight for gay rights, as were the boomers as well, of course. But I just cannot believe how many disenfranchised Gen Xers we have. A lot of them. So if it's safe to do so, if you can gradually talk to people about how there's all kinds of ways to be heroes without taking up your bang bang stick and running at the Capitol. We don't have to suppress the vote in the United States to control it. And there is a group of people, of course, we're seeing this all over the news, who are trying to suppress the voice of most people because they are frightened that they will not control the money anymore. So if we get an opportunity, and I'm a Gen Xer, and if you're somebody listening that, maybe you're a QAnoner or you're somebody who believes that there really is a Pizzagate, which I know you guys, there really isn't. I'm sorry for everybody who got hook, line, and sinkered on that one. Or if you're somebody out there listening today that in good faith, maybe your news network is Fox News. Maybe that's where you truly believe the truth is told. If you are somebody out there listening and you've recently been told by Donald Trump Jr. and a lot of pundits on Fox News that Joe Biden wants to limit your red meat consumption and you only get one hamburger a week or whatever this is. That never happened, gang. That never happened. That you got to remember that the fringe news shows, MSNBC, Fox News, they are more like news magazine network shows. And, there's some decent journalists on both of those stations, but they get buried in between a lot of propaganda on either side of the advertising aisle. So all I would tell you is that as we go forward in this time frame and the rest of this next year, How do we get out of that mob militia mentality that's been silenced because Facebook shut it up and Twitter shut it up? And we're not seeing a lot of that. People realized, oh, gee, we can no longer go on these platforms and pass around information about an insurrection. The FBI will find us and arrest us. So they're finding other ways to communicate. And like I said, I'm pretty sure the FBI has a line on that. However, if you're going to choose to share something on social media, choosing to share something about how much we can all be heroes to the climate if we do some very simple things. Now, you got to understand there are people itching for a fight, gang, and they're going to fight no matter what you and I do. And there's a lot of people who recognize that the old world is dead and passed away, and they're still kind of, like the people, oh, God bless them, the people with the Trump flags that, here in Montana, oh my goodness. Here in Montana, we had 33,000 people move into our state over the summer, this past summer, almost a year ago. And why did that happen? Well, we were absorbing a lot of folks leaving California and Oregon and Washington State who were pretty conservative people, very conservative. And they all moved to Montana. And we only had about 1 million people before these folks moved in. So that was a significant number of people. What is that, 3% or something of your voting block that changed. And it was enough to tip the state into, for the first time in our state's history, okay, we do not have a balanced Republican and Democratic government. This is the first time. Usually we have a Democrat senator, a Republican senator, a Democrat. We just got another House of Representatives person, so we'll see what happens there. But usually that person goes back and forth being a Democrat or a Republican. We only have one representative in Washington, D.C. up to this point. And usually the governor, our House and Senate in Montana, in our state government level, tend to be just old school John Wayne Republican, not the QAnon stuff, but the old school John Wayne Republican. And generally the governor tends to be a Democrat. And it's been like this forever. Or if we do happen to have a Republican governor in Montana, there's something in our House and our Senate will shift and we might have a Democratic majority somewhere or whatnot. Well, this is the first time because of our voting block shift that it is a solid Republican all the way across. And it's an unusual type of conservatism. It's more the big national politics conservatism, which is making the local Montana Republicans really nervous because they're just the good old ranchers. They're the, I don't care what you do socially. It's not my deal. Just don't overtax me. These are like the old school conservatives, the common sense conservatives, they used to call them. And then you've got our governor and you've got other folks who are coming in from a different thought modality that is more about religious control and big national ideologies and whatnot. So Montana, I'm using Montana as an example, has tipped in this crazy direction that's making the people who live here very nervous. And there's a few people, driving around that with their extremely tattered Trump flags and faded Trump flags that are still kind of trying to defy, I think, the last election. I don't know what's happening there. However, in my home state, I have choices to make. If things get really crazy, do I speak up? Do I step up? Do I say, hey, gang, we're kind of over the line? And we're seeing that right now in our state legislature. We're seeing old school Montana conservative Republicans stepping up to what I like to call the GQP Republicans, the QAnoners, and saying, wow, that's crazy. You want to do what in the legislature? No, we're voting no on that. That's insane. So we're seeing consciousness exercise itself in conscience. And the reason I brought all that up is not to make this a political podcast. The reason I brought it up is that I really want to make sure that people understand that what we're going to see is we're going to see some lines blurred on what we may think someone would do as opposed to what they're going to do. In other words, you might think, there may be some of you listening out there who may think that all Republicans are the same and they're super, super, super fringy and they're all religious zealots and crazy people. Well, that's not true. I live in a red state and most of those folks that vote Republican have no clue what this GQP thing even is. And they are slowly finding out as our governor is trying to take public lands and make them private and strip away EPA recommendations where ranchers are going to have mines stuck on top of their land with no regulations. And they're just shocked because an old school Montana Republican is actually a conservationist, So, I mean, what I'm saying here is that we will be asked in the days to come to give away our stereotypes, to give them away, because that's the only control mechanism that those who fear the evolution of the consciousness, especially in the United States, that's the only control mechanism they have left. And listen, I'm not saying that all Democrats are flawless here, and there's a lot of Democratic baiting and all kinds of things. What I'm talking about, and I'm just using our state as a low-hanging example because it really is. It's gotten so strange. Our state has made national news in so many ways. Our crazy governor body slammed somebody in 2016 when he was running for the House in in Washington, D.C., and he believes that dinosaurs were on the ark with Noah, and he has funded an alternative dinosaur museum in Glendive, Montana, where you can go in and read about Noah and the dinosaurs on the Bible. I mean, this gentleman is a unique person who is the governor of Montana. So, and he's also a billionaire. He's a tech billionaire. And he pretty much bought his way in. He's lost many times in Montana, and people finally saw his name enough times that they just voted for him. Yet I will tell you that when we go forward in this time frame, and we see our money changing, and we see our identities changing, and we see that our labels aren't fitting anymore, what do? Use your discernment. Yet if you have the opportunity to model consensus thinking and to model open communication, you're not really going to change anybody's mind. Yet if we can show everybody that each other isn't the issue, we really need to be coming together because Mother Nature is going to turn us over its knee and spank our butt hard in the next couple of years with rising sea levels and big floods in the Midwest and raging wildfires and just weird earthquakes in weird spots like St. Louis and in Nevada and of all weirdo places, New Mexico. Just looking into the shifts that the earth is making, our earth too is trying to shake off energies that haven't worked for it. And let's move outside the United States for a minute. Let's go down to India, where COVID is so prevalent right now, and so many people are dying. And we can actually put good, loving intention into the quantum field to put to rest some of this agitation that could then amount to riots in India, that could amount to these militias storming capitals to try to hold Capitol buildings hostage, forcing the National Guard to come out. And then, of course, they can prove to everybody that Big Brother is wanting their guns because they basically baited the federal government by defying the Constitution and being a state that's uprising. I mean, that's when you bait the bully, or the bully baits you, and you hit the bully and hit him square in the nose, and then the bully cries and said, he hit me, she hit me, she hit me. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this victim mentality because of the purposelessness that we've been feeling for generations. America rallies the troops around war. It rallies the people around war and a common enemy. And we're not really at war right now, where Biden's trying to pull troops out of places. And I mean, it's weird. So what can we do? One of the things that you can do is when you go online, make sure that you are spreading good news. If you do have something to say it plainly. It's not going to do anybody any favors anymore to coddle a-holism. If somebody's being a major a-hole to you, it doesn't do them a favor or you a favor to entertain that behavior because you're afraid of hurting their feelings. And we see this more with women than we do men. Guys, you'll just tell somebody to F off and that's the end of it. Sometimes guys get bullied, of course. Yet ladies especially, and gentlemen, I'm speaking to you too, but ladies especially, as we come into this time frame where the crap starters, shall we call them, have seemed very quiet on social media. It's because they're chatting other places. They're chatting in text chains. They're chatting all over. And it doesn't mean that they're still not broiling their big fat plan. They're just smart enough not to do it on social media and get popped by social media restrictions and rules. Yet if you have somebody in your life who is really just awful and a jerk and is choosing that low vibration behavior, again, when I was saying use discernment and who you feel you can talk to, it's not your responsibility to make them feel better, to save them, none of that. We don't have to bludgeon them and shut them off and cut them off, but we also don't have to become the next round of bullets in their gun of insults, okay? So I was talking earlier about the quantum field, and I talk about that a lot. And you'll notice that there's a real kind of weird, quiet boiling in the background. And I think we all know it's there, of something like we're just waiting for this other shoe to drop, and it's just kind of waiting to see what happens, after the Trump presidency and all the crazy that happened there. And as this lull is happening, we can take advantage of the weather of the springtime. We can take advantage of the energy of spring. The earth is awakening right now. So even if you take a few minutes every morning and just say, you know what, I send blessings to all the people on this planet who would be so afraid that they would hoard bullets because they really think the government is coming for their guns. I send them peace. I send people peace who are looking at our Black American population who are being still shot and killed by police officers. And I send the people peace who are so destroyed by that because that is a major work in progress. And we are still working on those injustices. And I send the people that would take violent action that has disastrous outcome. I send them peace, that we can come together and be able to send a message in a way that the message sending itself doesn't gain all the headlines. We can augment the quantum field by placing amazing energies into it. And a lot of you are going to be experiencing life changes too. This is it's a predictive podcast about what's to come. And there's a lot of life path changes that many of you are going to be experiencing. And a lot of you, I've talked to a lot of you lately, just a big uptick in client calls about big life changes that are coming your way that you weren't expecting. That's normal for this time frame, okay? And a lot of those folks that we would see, say, storm a Capitol building because they truly believe that the United States is going down a rabbit hole of death because they're reading some pretty demented fake news sources. When we have this opportunity to be able to tune into the fabric of the universe, which is the quantum field, and just put love out there and put understanding and put peace, get out there and connect with nature. When we have this opportunity to do so, we come out of the feeling of trying to create a false purpose through violence because we are one with something larger than ourselves. And in this case, that would be the earth. So going back to India, goodness, there are so many people. 1 in 3 are just dying over there. They're out of ventilators. They are out of oxygen. The United States is trying to send them oxygen as fast as they possibly can because India helped the United States when we first got hit so badly with COVID. We're trying to return the favor. They have one of the largest population blocks on the planet Earth. So we're really not making much of a dent, but we're trying. So if you want to make changes in the earth and you want to take some of the pressure cooker duress out of the same quantum field that is being shared by people with semi-automatic weapons and may not understand where all of this depression and panic is coming from, but they're just feeling that raise the temperature inside of them because we've got so many people in distress halfway around the world. and it happens to agitate their distress markers within their own bodies. You see where I'm going with this? We can send the people in India healing. Just a couple of minutes every morning, sit on the end of your bed and just open up your heart chakra and imagine like 2 shuttered doors opening up and this beautiful pink light flooding out and just filling up the filaments all over the world to be able to place healing energy inside of those who feel purposeless, wanton, hurt, lost, or anguished. And it does make a difference, gang. It makes a huge difference. You know, there are monks all over the world that all they do is meditate and pray for the world. And quite honestly, I cannot imagine what the balance of spiritual power would be if we did not have these groups of people who were in constant prayer, because they are offsetting great amounts of destruction and violence. You know, if we can just get 51% of the world on board with the idea of having faith in one another, having faith in the planet, 51%, we just need just to tip the margin. All we need is a 51 percentile of people who are willing to believe in their fellow human beings. It will affect the quantum field in such a way that maybe there are 48 or 50 militias ready to storm those Capitol buildings, and suddenly it's just feeling like a weird thing to do. We are connected with one another, gang. And as COVID resurges, and it is going to resurge, even though there's lots of folks with their vaccine. I got vaccinated. I did the Moderna vaccine. And my first one was awesome. I was all energized and jazzed. My second one, about 3 days later, I had a terrible, crappy day of just feeling like crap. And the next day after that, I was fine. Yet, you know, whatever it is in you that would be safe during this time, just know as we project forward into the future with our predictive podcast here, we are still going to be having problems. And I was seeing that where June, we were going to be opening up more at the same time that we were going to be experiencing more infections with COVID. And there's another hiccup around August of 2021 where we're going to start to try to dial it back in again and do kind of I don't want to say a shutdown, but a fall monitoring of this raise in COVID cases. Some folks are still getting the COVID strains, even though they do have their vaccine. So let's just be mindful. Okay. However, we can affect the world positively, gang, by remembering that we are energetic beings in physical bodies, and by remembering to institute, I don't want to say meditation, but you could call it that, or prayer, or just even going and having fun safely with your COVID pod or some of your friends. You know, in Montana, our very interesting governor has lifted all of the COVID restrictions. And he instituted a common sense policy, which is, you know, just be smart, social distance, blah, which in Montana means some people are wearing masks, a lot of them aren't. And they're not really socially distancing either. However, we're seeing an uptick in COVID cases again, and the cold and flu that we didn't see in Montana the whole time people were wearing masks, because why would you get that? You had a mask on, right? So we're going to be seeing energies attempt to exercise themselves as the greater world evolves into a place of needing to care for one another and care for the planet. And remember, our younger generations, you know, sure, you can find a few young people who've been drug into this age-old militia fight thing by their parents or whatever. But most of these kids, they don't want any part of it. And they are still very hopeful, and they too are affecting the quantum field. And they have an amazing sense of being very open with one another and being sweet with one another and dealing with the world in a way that they aren't defeated yet, even though they're looking at the climate issues with a lot more serious than some of the older generations are. So remember, as you endeavor into the rest of 2021, that this is a time frame of reaching out to the quantum field and putting the best you've got into it. And that's going to help waylay some of these big militia run-ons and all the fear. And we are not going to get the carefree country back that we had before 2016. We will, however, move forward and be able to develop a communication system and a respect system with one another. Where our naivete has been stolen, it will be replaced by true purpose, and that is stewardship for the earth, for one another, making sure we've got clean water. I know for those of you who've been following this podcast this is year 3 of this podcast. So for a couple of years and following my videos, you've been hearing me talk about dirty water and how come 2021 to 2022, starting in 2020 really, but we were all sequestered in 2020, so we didn't see it much, that we were going to be seeing water problems. Well, that's already started. So if we can understand that we may not get our American naivete back, for white America, our people of color have been like, what are you talking about? Things have been hard here for a while. Hello. What we're going to be seeing is that there's going to be a new call to purpose. And if we can put aside the rhetoric of the last 4 years, and I know that's hard for a lot of people, we can begin to find new purpose and new heroism in just working together to keep our water clean and keep our people fed. We can find a new purpose and heroism and not hoarding resources, but being excited about new opportunities, especially with money that are going to explode. And, crypto is a crazy thing, right? And the whole Dogecoin thing that took off, for those that don't know what Dogecoin is, it's a fake cryptocurrency, which if you really want to look at cryptocurrency, it's a fake money system, Dogecoin, because cryptocurrency is the quote fake money system, which is not fake anymore because everybody decided to use it. So everyone's collective participation gave it value. And that is the ultimate definition of manifestation right there. So we're going to see crypto go crazy. We're going to see a lot of different things. We're going to see regulation on crypto try to happen and all these different things. However, we're going to see younger people have access to wealth. And they're going to do amazing things with it. And maybe some generations, those of us that were taught in the 80s, bigger house, bigger car, bigger boobs, bigger everything. We will be inspired by the selflessness of these young people who, God bless them, have their head on straight about what's important. And they're taking their millions in crypto and cleaning up the water. And they want to see boomers and Gen X and even the older millennials. They want to see us participate with them and care about the planet. So just watch for these changes. We've got a lot of changes coming in, gang. And the big overarching message of this podcast is don't be judging a book by its cover, okay? This is a real bad time to do that, though do be discerning. Kind of watch for the cray-cray eye in people because folks are kind of tipped sideways a little bit right now, post-pandemic and coming back into another rise in our COVID numbers. However, don't judge a book by its cover. And no matter what happens in the country, don't think it is lost because it's not. And remember that we have millions upon millions of young people out there who don't even want to be part of this fight because they're very busy trying to save the planet. And at any time, any of us can join that very noble cause. And that too sends a balance to the quantum field and to the ethers, to send balm emotionally and spiritually to areas like India and to all our state capitals that, God, the drama in America. Ugh. But we got this, gang. We really do. Do not allow just slightly wonky things that are going to pop up in the news for the duration of 2021. Don't allow it to knock you off of your horse because we are here for a reason and we are here to manifest beautiful things. We're here to keep our water clean. We're here to keep our oceans clean. We're here to keep our minds clean. And so just remember that there's a lot of support going forward. Connect with nature. Connect with one another. Don't be afraid to be a force for good in this world. We're getting ready to really rip the lid off a road angel, and I can't wait to be able to talk more about that. I have not had the opportunity to because I am waiting on some information and the thumbs up and the appropriate time to release that information about where you can watch the show and all of these things. Yet even with Road Angel, we have so much in that show that sheds a light on why we have the issues we have in certain geographical areas of the country and how we can come together in our highest design to overcome it. So there's a lot to look forward to. Don't wig out. Just put on your Dolly Parton wig, and the higher the hair, the closer to God, and you can get great messages. So we will see you with those great messages next podcast. Y'all take care.